we'll have, so.
Then we won't do that. How's that?
Perfect.
So I guess that's me.
That's you.
Well, welcome everyone. Glad we figured out how to get here.
Kinda.
So you guys should have a document from me dated December 9th that I believe was sent out last week or so. And it provides basically a summary of kind of my findings and my recommendations at this point. I want to make clear at this point it's important because I view it as a work in progress. I also, before I get into the specifics of it, the last section is, I believe, titled, draft narrative for the plan. And this is kind of a shift in approach on my part compared to other documents and so forth. When we reviewed the draft of the first half of the plan, we got into a discussion about really wanting something shorter and conciser. And I'm ultimately working towards that. So that last section is kind of a short, tight narrative that will expand a bit, but to kind of give you a flavor for where we're heading and so forth. So to do this assessment, I started with a review of the prior plans from 10 years ago and kind of a look at what was done related to community facilities and what were the recommendations and so forth. I will say there's one oddity about that plan in the context of the community facilities, in that if you recall, or if you're familiar with that plan, it focused a lot on things that were beyond your guys' control. So it talked about as an Nantucket University, community college and so forth, in facilities that are not actually town-owned, town-operated, and so forth. So I didn't go there because I believe that's beyond your purview. That doesn't mean they don't matter, but at the end of the day, this is a plan for the town. So the next step was to actually do interviews with department heads or key persons associated with various agencies to get a feel from them on their facility needs and how their facilities are working for them. And then kind of pulling everything together from what I learned, what I know, and then ultimately drafting this summary and kind of narrative. Big picture, largest finding on my part, I'd say there's two large findings on my part. One is I feel you guys are in better shape with facilities than I had anticipated. So I was kind of pleasantly surprised along the way in some ways. But the thing that probably concerned me the most, since there's not a lot of pressing facilities needs, not that there aren't some, was the idea or concerns raised over deferred maintenance or the trying to think how to best say it, and I think I used the phrase in this document, kind of being more proactive about maintenance, that there's maybe this things break and then get fixed rather than kind of that regular routine maintenance to get to things before they actually break. So those are kind of the two key big findings. If you want, I will go through now just kind of each of these sections very briefly. And I'd say as I'm talking about each, like the first one being the public library and recreation services, anyone feel free at any moment to cut in on me, ask questions, make comments. And most important, if you guys feel I've missed something, if there's a need that you guys believe exists related to any of these facilities or other facilities, please pass it on to me and let me know. So with that said, overall, general feeling was the library facilities are work relatively well. The branch library seems to do really well as far as a facility goes and meeting the community needs. The main library, while maybe a bit small, but not that huge of an issue. The biggest concern raised there was the lack of meeting space. The fact that there is a really good community room that's well utilized, but overall a lack of meeting space for community organizations and entities to utilize. Interesting. I was quite surprised when I realized that senior services and recreation services are tied into or under the direction of the library. That's a bit of a unique format compared to other communities. It's not something you see very often. But to be honest with you, in the end, my feeling is it works really well. That from a programming side of things, there is a lot of interesting overlap between these entities. And therefore, I think it's something that's very good. Ultimately, as far as the senior center goes, I tied back to the existing conditions report and kind of where you are demographically. The fact is, you guys are an aging community. I don't see that trend ending anytime soon. And therefore, I think it's reasonable to anticipate a increase in demand on senior services. And from what I've gathered through kind of interviews and so forth, there is quite robust demand at this point on senior services. And your senior center facility is relatively new and functioning relatively well. If demand for services increases, it's probably more on the programming side than it is actually on the facilities side. That was the other thing. So the old Fermi, the town annex, and I'll just say this here because it kind of pops up in other places. That space has added, I think a lot of good capacity to the town. And therefore probably, limits the busting at the seams reports of agencies. Yeah. And then the Higgins Park plan, and you can update me if I'm behind on data on this, because I know this was a moving target. I believe the referendum didn't pass for the additional improvements related to Higgins Park. At the end of the day, for me, Higgins Park ties back to amenities and this idea of amenities of place and how we improve the quality of life in the image of Enfield. So therefore, my finding on Higgins Park is that this is a really important facility, and it should be built, it should be funded, and so forth. And I recognize that's a challenge, from the referendum perspective, but it's something that probably does need strong community support.
So the referendum didn't pass, but the work has been ongoing. I know the paving of the walking path was just completed last week, I believe. The new playscape is in place. The basketball courts have been completed, and the grading's in process. Yeah,
and that's good, and that's why I was just saying, kind of update me on that. I knew stuff was still ongoing. And it's like it's not an all or none deal, but moving forward, the specifics of that referendum and those improvements should probably be reconsidered to ensure that over time that the whole park does get constructed as planned.
Yeah, I do believe that there's alternative funding being sought, and they do have approval to purchase the Enfield Express, which is going to be able to expand the parking, which is very good. So it's right now it's still down to funding for the pool and the gym.
Yep. And actually, since you mentioned that, I believe, and correct me if I pronounce it wrong, is it the Lamagna Center?
Yeah, Lamagna.
Okay. I believe with the closure of that, right now, you guys have a lack of outdoor swimming pools.
Right. That's the only,
I'm sorry, what?
That's the only one.
Right. And that's why, one of the aspects of Higgins Park is that swimming pool. That I just feel like, that is important. You guys do have some indoor pools, and I know they're well utilized, but that kind of summer outdoor facility, I'd be hard pressed to find a community that doesn't have an outdoor swimming pool. So I kind of
Suffield.
raised that to a level of importance.
Yes.
Well, Suffield's a weird place. So no.
Oh, thanks.
Oh, do you live there?
Yes.
I know that. So,
Hey, so
Uh,
Don, I got a
okay.
couple questions, comments on this one. So first of all, I think your explanation that it seems like an odd marriage that works between the library and the senior center is that the senior center used to be under social services. There were some personality issues, and what was generated was more of a leisure services department that pulled out the senior center from social services and tucked it in under the very capable director of libraries, Jason Neely. So that's kind of like the backstory to it, and it had to do with personalities.
Okay.
In your write-up under library and recreational services, so Fermi, or the Enfield Annex,
Yep.
of course, when I was on the council, I always had the vision that that would become a true recreational center. I don't know if the town's actually designated it as a true rec center, but it would need a lot of upgrades. So they're starting to use it, and I don't know if this plan should really focus more on making that become a true community center, with a heavy investment that's required. Years ago, there was an effort to expand the library, but there was even conversations at one point in time about bringing the library over to the Fermi in a 2-floor library in the academic portion of the building where the library and the classrooms used to be. Whether this plan starts to talk about combination. So the library was always thought as being lacking of space, and that they would need something larger, and it would require an expansion of the existing building. And then my final comment is, we have a lot of parks in town that some are being focused on recently by the council, but others are not. And I don't know how in depth this plan should go to say, talking about some of our larger ones like Brainerd Park and Powder Hollow and
Green Manor.
What's that?
The Green Manor Park, as an example.
Green Manor, yeah.
We have a skate park, which had plans to be expanded in the future, but that hasn't really come into any discussions with expanding those.
Okay. Those should actually be addressed. So that's follow-up work for me, definitely, to focus in on the parks. I guess I'll kick the question back to you, Scott, and basically to the committee. What's this committee's feeling on the annex and what it should be in the future? And if you guys, have a general consensus, general feeling as to what that should be, then I think, this plan should promote a more cohesive future for that facility.
Would that be another opportunity for something like a community-oriented pool or a poll where we can reach out to the community and get their thoughts on something like that?
Could be.
Rich must have something to say because he turned his camera on.
Well, I sort of agree in terms of, it seems that, we're not utilizing all the areas that we have that would promote, more general use of and different areas of town that, you know, could be used. You know, right now it seems like everything's concentrated in Thompsonville, and what we need to do is sort of divert, you know, some of the attention to the other sections of town. And, you know, I think that, you know, the annex has plenty of space if we did want to build a pool out there, you know, and I believe they have a pool inside, you know, the annex. So it's one of those kind of things where, you know, possibly, you know, during winter time, you'd go and swim inside the annex, and during the summertime, you could swim outside at the annex. And I know there's a tennis court there, and when I used to play a lot of tennis, and after you play tennis, obviously you'd have to take a shower, but you know, a nice dip in a pool is always really, really appreciated when you do a lot of, you know, physical activities. And they do have, you know, the track there, and they do have, you know, I guess there's some diamonds there too. So that would lend itself to be, you know, more utilized a lot more than it really is at this time.
Yeah, and Rich, the comments I got on the pool were that it's typically used for the swim teams. So it's kept at a lower temperature than a typical recreational pool would be. Plus, there's been a lack of lifeguards, so it hasn't really been open for public use, because that's something I was interested in. I thought it would be a great opportunity, get a town pool that I could go to for reduced rate versus a club. So when I asked into that, those were some of the points that were brought up to me from different people, that why it hasn't been used quite as well as it could be.
Yeah, well, you know, the thing is, you know, if you're really interested in doing something, even if the temperature is, it shouldn't be a spa, you know, it should be for exercise. And typically you can tolerate a little cooler water if you're actually moving in the water rather than just sitting around and talking. So I think that, you know, and I think that, you know, if everybody's using it for, you know, exercise, then I think that it's beneficial for it not to be too warm.
Depends how you want to orient it to, like, as a community fun free swim type thing, or more as an exercise. So it all depends how you want to target it. Yeah.
So, no, thanks.
Other thoughts about the annex as a true community center? And the investment that would have to go into it?
Did we replace the field at the annex?
It's meaning, is it the regular, it's the football field with the turf?
Right, well, when you and I were there, we put the new fields in, but I was told that they had to replace the turf because it's worn out now and they're going back to grass because the turf isn't such a good thing anymore. And I believe they're changing Enfield High out now. And I was just wondering if we changed out Fermi to grass. I mean, that was a huge investment for this town. And I think keeping those fields part of the annex, and especially if we make it a recreation facility, it's kind of all inclusive. It covers everything.
Yeah, I don't know about the fields, to be honest, so.
It's hard to believe we had to replace that turf already.
Yes. I know you have to replace the spongy stuff that's, you know.
Yeah.
The rubber, I think it's rubber little pellets in the field. So well, that's a question to follow up on, is what is the town's current plan for Fermi? Are they replacing artificial with real on that one field?
Or maybe Fermi isn't ready to be done yet because it's had less use since we merged the high schools. So, I mean, Enfield High's field is definitely taking a lot more abuse than Fermi's.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that could be something we could get an answer to, Don.
Yep. I've been taking notes, so.
You know, I would like to see Fermi used a lot more than it sounds like they're planning on it. The plan that came out with the annex of a while ago was, you know, they were going to convert part of the floors to, you know, rental space and so forth. Yet there's still groups in town that want to have meeting space and they can't find it. You know, the town won't let them use certain meeting spaces, and they have to jump through hoops to get it. You know, the garden club, for one, you know, they can't find a place to meet. So, I don't understand why it's so difficult to get a place to meet. So, and we've got a lot of rooms there, and I don't see why either a certain area of that building couldn't be used for those kind of nighttime meetings or daytime meetings that people are looking for. And it could be signed up, you know, even if you say there's going to be 4 or 5 classrooms that are going to be allowed to be used in this manner, and access will be provided somehow. I don't know. I just don't know why we have to build, and then we end up tearing down something else. So, you know, why can't EMS go in there? At least the administrative part of them. I don't know.
I have
Melissa?
input. Yeah, thank you. From having sat with the Joint Facilities Committee for the last couple of years and tried to keep my head around what was going on there, I think the question they were asking is not like what should happen to Fermi for all time, but what's necessary kind of short term around the needs of rearranging buildings and getting roofs done and meeting, you know, fairly near term needs. So I think that what you're saying could come up as a next phase of discussion, the way I read it. And I agree.
Mary Ann? You're muted, Mary Ann.
I just have a question where Karen was going. Melissa touched. I'm sorry I'm late. I tried to get on through the phone. It didn't work. Why can't Fermi just be used, period, right now? What is the hang up? I mean, there must be dozens and dozens of rooms in there that are empty. I mean,
I don't think they're empty, Mary Ann. I think there's a lot of stuff that they've used.
Storage.
They've used Fermi as a depository for excess school furniture, record storage, things like that. I mean, someone else may have better knowledge that's been in the school. Rich?
Well, I guess I heard that, you know, that they have a lot of interior space in terms of there were a lot of classrooms that didn't have any windows or whatnot. And realistically, you know, people like to see outside a window or have, you know, recognizing what the time of day it is by having some association with, you know, sunlight or nighttime or whatever. So I think that a lot of it has to do with the fact that, you know, a lot of the rooms don't have, you know, windows associated with them.
Yeah, but people who need a meeting space, I'm telling you, Rich, they don't care about windows.
But again, that's what I heard in terms of, you know, I'm with you in terms of, you know, if I'm working, I don't need to look outside.
You got to think there's 3 floors of classrooms that are in a U shape. Okay, so right side of the, say, back side of the building, North Maple Street side of the building, and the front of the school part of the building. They all have windows, and there's 3 floors of them. And to Karen's point, back when we were talking about this years ago, it was thought that to keep the PTOs out of the individual schools, give them a classroom. That would be their meeting space. They could leave their junk there. They would have the key. They would lock the door. So like one floor, one side would be the 9 different PTOs. But then there would be open meeting space that they would sign out through the town to reserve space. No personal stuff is left there. And so you just show up, set up, pack up, clean up, leave. But that there was open, you know, open areas for different organizations to go to as well.
The art group here, we have the Tobacco Valley Artists, and we have they have another name too. They're desperately looking for space, and the space they need is not only to have their meetings, but that they can teach people how to do painting things. It's not me, but as you probably figured out, but I know they desperately need space, and I just don't know why we have to make it hard. If it's hard, it may not be hard. I don't know what I'm talking about, but.
I think we make a comment of, hey, if this is what the group wants, more utilization of the annex as a true community center.
Yeah, open up the first floor and let the space be used, and all the junk you got in there, move it up.
Or move it down.
Or throw it
a
out.
or throw it out, but move it down onto the basement floor where you don't have to worry about structural, right, Rich?
Yes, definitely.
Scott, can I ask Melissa a question?
Sure.
Melissa, with your involvement in the community facilities committee or the joint facilities committee, do you know if any, facility assessment has been done of the Fermi property? Has the town reviewed it for conditions and so forth? You're muted, sorry.
I know there was some initial assessment of a whole series of properties and then kind of prioritizing and diving deeper into a shorter list of properties. And there was a lot of regular reporting to the council at every step. But the struggle was to work in the most depth with the consulting group that was hired for that plan to do the sort of most critical referenda, knowing that we could get, each referendum that we do means others we don't do. So,
yeah.
But those notes are all there, and Donna Suzak, Walter Frizzell et al., I'm sure would happily answer questions.
Okay, great, thank you.
I got a question.
Go ahead, Karen.
In your plan, you mentioned the schools and the declining enrollment and so forth. Do we have any projections as to what we're looking at as far as the utilization of schools in the next 10 years? I think maybe if that discussion could happen, and because right now we've got Noah Webster's sitting out there, or is it Noah Webster, the one in Green Manor?
Nathan Hale, right?
That's sitting there not being utilized, and it's
people reach out on that one, Karen, to buy it a couple times. There's been looked at.
Yeah, I know, but we're going to have more of these facilities that aren't going to be used, and this is what I'm saying is what.
I don't think so. And the reason I'm saying that, they have sister schools. You understand that concept? Are you aware of it?
Yeah, and I don't get that either, but whatever the board decided, I guess they decided on that.
Well, the thing is they're utilizing the schools better, and they're keeping the kids moving together. And they're using more the space, from what I understand, better.
Yeah, but I've also heard parents have to go to two or three different schools now to pick up their kids because they're attending at least two different schools.
Well,
you got K
when you have
K
kids,
through
they got
3. Well, if you've ever been stuck in the traffic jam at Hazardville Memorial, it's very annoying.
I don't think that not that it's our discussion, but if you have children of different ages, they're going to go to different schools no matter where you live. It's just how it is.
It's not why the neighborhood schools were originally built. So, whatever.
We don't need them anymore.
All right, anything else on the idea of the community center?
Yeah, I'm just doing some quick Googling. I remember they did do a Fermi Building Reuse Committee back in 2014, and I do see at least one slideshow, but the one I saw, I remember having it broken up, like Scott said, where each section was devoted to a different group, and they had the library moving in there. I can't find that document now. The reuse document I found in the PowerPoint it's a little bit drier. And just goes over the different facilities and all the different JFK and Enfield High School and all that. But it might be worth talking to the town and seeing if that can be located as well, because that might give a little bit of history and context as to what they were originally planning to do with the annex back 5-6 years ago.
Thank you.
Hopefully where they're storing all that stuff, Scott, is in the rooms with no windows. But that's too logical.
Laura, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. I will talk to Donald Nunes, the Director of Public Works. He probably has any facilities plans that have ever been done. So I'll find out what the latest and greatest is. There are some other uses there. Opera House Players uses the theater on occasion. ETV has been located there. There is some continuing ed there, I think. But I'm pretty sure that there are some sort of facilities plans available.
Cool. So just quickly, did I kind of hear a consensus, at least in the most general sense, that it sounds like you guys would like to see a greater utilization of that facility and probably leaning more towards recreation and community access? Is that a safe comment?
I think so. It's going to provide 2 centrally located community hubs, one in Thompsonville and one on the other side of town, where within driving distance at least.
Great. Mike, thanks for that link. I downloaded that file. I appreciate that.
What are you referring to in Thompsonville, Mike?
Yeah.
The plans, right? So we're looking to develop a community hub with the Bell site property, having the gym there for recreation, ultimately potentially having a pool there.
Oh, yeah.
All
Okay,
of that.
right. You're not talking about Lamagna. You're talking about the new gym.
Yeah. I know Lamagna's, the plans are to remove that from the equation.
Right. Okay, thank you.
If I might, that's not necessarily a done deal. We're investigating keeping it as well.
Then that should be, I know Lamagna was mentioned, Don, in your document, but then that might be a heavier consideration if that's not going to be necessarily demolished.
What,
Mary
Scott,
Ann?
when the heck did we decide we weren't taking the Lamagna Center down? Last time I talked to Nelson, it was slated.
So I think, yeah, go ahead, Lori.
Yeah, I'm sorry. It was in the original plans, but in looking at it, we're going to see if anybody's interested in reusing it. So it's actually going out for what they call a request for proposals or request for interest in redevelopment of both the sites, and we're just going to see what happens.
Oh, wait a minute. It's not that we're not gonna, we, the town of Enfield, are still getting rid of it.
Most likely, but we're just trying to figure out what the best, if there is an adaptive reuse that's reasonable, we might do that. But like I said, Nelson's getting a request for interest out to see if anybody would be interested in keeping it and redeveloping it. So at that point, yes, the town would get rid of it. Or we would get rid of it by demolition. So one way or the other, most likely.
But you're not saying that the town will look for a reuse of it. That's what I'm trying to make sure.
Not to my knowledge, but
Okay.
things seem to change a lot lately. So.
Thank you.
All right. Don, do you want to move on the document?
Sure. Sorry, I was having fun with Mike's links. Once again, thanks, Mike. Sorry, too many documents open here. Let me get back to my document. So then the Enfield Emergency Medical Services, this at the end of the day really came across as the facility in greatest need. That they, appear to be busting at the seams and have struggles. I know once again on the referendum side, I don't believe the expansion to the police station or the public safety facility went through. But from a facility standpoint, this was my finding of, there is the greatest need. I think the other opportunity with that is, and I don't know if it's been discussed, so I felt I was going out on a limb here, but that potentially, if a future referendum goes through and EMS were to move into the police station, which seems to make sense, that the existing facility should probably be retained and maintained by EMS also. So, thoughts, comments? questions.
Anyone? Go ahead, Karen.
The fire departments have offered to provide EMS services in the past, and we've shut them down every single time. And they're, neighborhood located. They're centrally located in their districts, and I think it's a missed opportunity by not going back to them and talking to them again. But we choose to sue them instead and cause hard feelings and everything else in between. So I don't know, what their feeling would be as far as providing a facility for an ambulance to be parked there in a warm spot, and if the town would even be interested in doing that instead of building a multi-million-dollar facility that may or may not get used regionally.
So Karen, the way I see it, and again, I've been separated for a couple of years. The benefit of having the town run EMS is that the town is an entity that can waive the Medicare copay, where a fire department cannot. So if EMS moves to the fire departments, financially, the residents of Enfield will pay more for their medical services if they have to use an ambulance. So that's the big driving benefit for it to be with a municipality that has the right to waive the Medicare copay. So, I mean, that's something to consider. I don't know if it's the plan of conservation and development to figure out who's going to run EMS in town. I don't think so. But finding adequate space for what we currently have is, and do we say, hey, explore opportunities for satellite EMS locations in town, whether it be for someone on the committee mentioned, why don't you house it at Fermi or at the annex? We keep calling it Fermi. Wouldn't hurt to have an ambulance at North Thompsonville and at Weymouth Road Fire for quick access, right? If they can come to an agreement, but maybe you go high level of diversifying location within existing facilities. So.
I wrote that down as a potential, recommendation to explore that. So, anyone else?
So looks like police department's next.
Yeah, so police department kind of falls into the same category, but probably not as severe. The interesting thing was I was doing my interviews on these facilities a week before the referendum. Oh, someone's feeding back.
Yeah, whoever just feeding back.
I muted them.
Okay, thanks, Mike.
So, the interviews were taking place just before the referendum, and there was a general anticipation, I think, amongst all departments and agencies that the referendum would pass. So I was kind of surprised when I saw that it didn't. The police department definitely has needs in terms of space. They really felt that with the referendum, their needs would be well met and, sustain them into the future and so forth. Also felt that their vehicle fleet was adequate. However, just kind of that constant feeling that they're on the edge with it, in the sense of, if more than 2 vehicles go down for repairs at a given time, that sometimes they can be pressed on vehicles. But in that, at that point in time, I didn't see much of a need here on the police side, other than, just now recognizing that the referendum didn't pass. It creates a more pressing need on just general office space that they're just kind of busting at the seams. So. Fire districts, at the end of the day, they're their own entity. So I even go back and forth kind of with whether or not they should be included in the POCD or not. But it's a required service. It's a, baseline, it's a basic service and so forth. So I think just at least the 3 paragraphs that I wrote on them is kind of just worthy of recognition in the plan, that you guys have 5 fire districts, that they are their own independent entities. They are self-funding. I did a joint meeting with all the chiefs. They all felt pretty confident about their facilities and didn't express any extensive facility needs, also recognizing that they pay for their own facilities, and then just recognizing the current expansion or addition at one and possible at another. But they seemed pretty set. If there was one key outcome of that meeting, was just the general feeling amongst them that there needs to be better communication and coordination between the fire districts and the town. It seems like on the day-to-day, the permitting stuff, that stuff goes very well, but I think it's on the more big picture kind of strategy, and then stuff around the call center, the 911 emergency center, and so forth and so on. So, but it was more about communications and cooperation than it was about facilities. So.
Anyone have any comments on fire districts? I think it's worth, oh, go ahead, Karen.
Going back to the police, based on something you just said, Don, would the 911 system be able to be run out of an area in Fermi, and that would free up more space for the police, for office space and whatever at the police department? Or is it not a good idea to have it separated from the actual department? Scott, I don't know if you know that, or if that's even been thought of, seeing the referendum didn't make it.
Don't they already have an operations center running out of Alcorn, or did they for a bit?
They have something over there, but I think the cameras and everything are over there. So I know all the antennas are over at the police station, but it's not that far to run some wires. I don't know. I mean, stuff's done with satellites and everything else now, so in dishes and so forth. But I don't know, do we even have a backup 911 plan if the 911 center went down? I don't know how. I'm sure there's some kind of plan in place, but
I believe it automatically kicks to the state police. So there's overlap between the state and local, and that's an automatic kick over.
Yep.
I can ask the question. I mean, I never really thought of that. I think it's worthy asking the question. My gut tells me the movement of the technology, antennas, and that stuff may be more complicated than it sounds. But I think, at least in the context of if the intent is to explore the space of Fermi and better utilization of it, then everything should be explored. So I think the question's worthy. So I'll follow up on that.
Even if it's just records management moves over to Fermi or the annex, that might be the option if it's space for their storage.
You're talking the police records.
Yeah, I think the Joint Facilities Committee people's study did look at that and did talk to a lot of those folks. So maybe you want to, and I just found that final study and sent it to Lori and to Mike, because that's whose email address I had handy.
Great. I'm sure they'll send it on.
All right, anything on fire? Everyone go to fire districts? All right, public schools.
Public schools. This kind of gets back to, Karen, your prior comment or kind of question around enrollments and projections going forward. Well, I looked more at historical. One is your historical losses are huge. One of the largest I've seen in the state. And enrollments continue to contract and go downwards. Your demographic, the age structure of your population is still trending older. You've had substantial loss of less than, under the age of 18 and so forth. So my general feeling is best case scenario, your enrollments level out and flatline and stay kind of where they are. I think it's more likely than not that they will continue to contract more moving forward, that they haven't found that leveling off point yet. But that being said, I mean, you have contracted fairly substantially on school facilities. I think in addition to Fermi, and correct me if I'm wrong, it's been a couple weeks since I looked at the data. I think there's been 2 other school closings or repurposings since the last plan. So therefore, yeah, I think it's possible. Could there be further contraction and the potential for, a further closing? Yes. But I'm not sure total population, what that would take, to get there. The one thing you can always be sure of, and sometimes this is hard for communities to grasp, but your enrollment population is constantly going to shift around in the community. Some neighborhoods turn over more rapidly than others and so forth and so on. So at the elementary school level, you always have this kind of need for redistricting and readjusting or shifting grades around with the middle school and the elementary schools to try and strike those balances. And I see that as probably the greatest need moving forward. Is just that keeping a close eye on enrollments and adjusting as need be.
So on your chart, you have Nathan Hale listed as an elementary school.
Yep.
So it's been closed. So I would think you would maybe do if you want to leave it as a building inventory, but I believe it's not even a school building inventory anymore. It's town inventory. So I would remove Nathan Hale. So that's one of the buildings you're talking about that's closed in the last 10 years. The other was the small one that's, Stowe got repurposed to the Early Learning Center.
Yeah.
And then it's the small one, the Head Start facility, which is Head Start. I thought Head Start combined into Early Learning Center.
It did.
Yeah.
And that's why I believe that small one isn't listed here. I removed it.
Yeah.
For some reason, I think it started with an A, but I can't remember. Nathan Hale, I'm kind of surprised. So I'm either feeling like it was either still listed on the Board of Ed site or the district site, or I forgot to remove it. One of the two occurred there. So I started with the list from the prior plan, and then went through and cross-referenced against the existing school facilities to eliminate. So it may have just been an error on my part, or it was still listed. So
Elkhorn is the other school that was closed and repurposed.
Yeah. I'm wondering if the Eagle Academy, is that considered separate from Enfield High School, or is that all combined and part of the same square footage?
Did Head Start become the Eagle Academy, Mike?
Head Start moved out, and then the Eagle Academy became a separate entity under Enfield High School. It's my understanding.
Okay, so then that building became part of Enfield High School, essentially. Used to stand alone. Okay.
And would you include something, this is just public schools? Yeah, all right.
yeah. Sorry, I'm just making notes here. Just bear with me. Okay. Any other questions or comments on schools? Cool.
Cool. Yeah.
Town office facilities overall seem adequate, and not of big concern, other than your whiny development director. I mean, Lori. No. I'm kidding.
And I will continue to whine, as out of all of the offices in that entire town hall, the planning department and the building department are so cramped, we could barely move.
Yeah.
And we can't have conversations without everybody hearing it, and it's very loud. It's really bad.
Yeah.
But all the other offices seem just fine.
So, from a space perspective, I mean, I think that's a interesting need challenge. Lori, after you and I spoke, this just it was a thought that flew through my head after the fact. You guys purchased that bank property next door, correct? And you guys run that kind of drive-through window through there, which I find really interesting. And I'm not sure what the utilization of that space overall is.
Yeah, so tax and assessor went over there, and there's also a substation for the police.
Okay.
So that building is now full. And
is full.
that space is from the town hall is being converted to another meeting room.
Okay. I was just, and that's why I wasn't too sure on that. I had this thought of like, wow, if you think of the traffic that gets driven through a permitting department, that bank space kind of appeared as maybe an interesting opportunity, but I guess not. So,
I thought of it, but it was not decided to go that way.
Right. Understood. Fair enough. Karen?
Probate court. That's in the town hall.
Yes, it
And-
is, right next to the planning department.
Exactly. So, good old annex, or I know there was talk about the Institute, but I don't know if that would ever work or not, but, again, storage seems to be a problem. People need vaults, they need files, storage, and so forth. And apparently, I don't know how much the town hall is used up in storage space, but I know Fermi's high and dry, and it's not going to get wet there, that's for sure. Where in the basement at the town hall, I think it's a constant problem. So, just a thought.
Yeah, all of our files and pretty much everybody's files are up in the attic and down in the where there used to be the garage down in the town hall. It is so full up there that they are concerned at some point that there's going to be an issue with weight. So, and statutorily, and Don knows this, that we have to keep files for 10 years accessible. So it's a conundrum. And then building department has to pretty much keep their files pretty much forever. So
Yeah.
Does that mean physical?
yeah. Well, I mean, they've got to be accessible. It's an issue of being able to. I mean, we have, since COVID, we scan everything, but we still have to have paper copies, and especially like plan sets. Nobody wants to be able to look at things on a small screen. They want to be able to have hands-on. So we did actually get a digital file reader plan sets, but we haven't had a place to hook up the TVs yet. So we're trying.
Why can't
Try to
we,
make do with what we can.
why can't we send some of the older files out to Iron Sides or Iron Mountain, they'll deliver them in the same day if you have a need. And they're in Windsor. And we looked at them for when I was on the health district. Why can't we try to be a little more or considerate? I mean, I know there'd be a cost. I mean, you'd have to rent space kind of like, but you might find that might be an opportunity to put in the list of things to wish for, or at least investigate.
Yeah, I think we've thought about that and digitizing everything, but there's a cost to that. And we do have a records manager. And he knows exactly where all the files are at this point. So he goes up and grabs them for us eventually when he has a chance and brings them down, and then we have to push them back up. So, I mean, I think it would have to be a town-wide issue.
Right, but it could be.
Yeah, well,
and it could be
a matter of a cost, I guess.
Probably less cost than the building coming down, or trying to continue to find space. Just,
hey, I'm on the top floor
just
underneath it all, so I get it.
It might just be something to put on the consider list.
Yeah, I think that it's been talked about. I just don't know how far it's gotten. But it's a great idea. I mean, certainly a solution.
I see Scott walked away. I got my hand up. But since we're talking about records management, which has always been a problem, with the space that we have at the annex, why don't we move all the records there with the records manager? And then if I go into the building department and I want to see the plans for, a mall on Route 5, they can say, okay, it's over in the records management division. You got to go to the annex. I go there and it's pulled, because I mean, I know it's all about costs. And, I do know that the town hall has been overfull for a long time, and they're trying to, I know Higgins was full, and it sounds like that's what they're doing with the annex anyways. But if we were to move everything there and organize it, then anybody who comes into your office requesting something that's over, 6 months approved, it's at the annex, and they can go to the records, just like the police department. They have their own separate area. You go over to records, you request it, and they give it to you. And, if the entire town, even the Board of Ed could do that. I mean, even if it's in the basement, and somebody mentioned about, hopefully the records aren't in the windows rooms, which I'm sure they probably are, but we move them all to the non-window room, one, for safety, because, Fermi's a concrete building, so it would be like a vault, and it's dry. And the gentleman, you put your request in, he goes, gets the documents, and it's done. And it costs nothing. We already have the man on staff, and we'd really be, consolidating all the records to one place. And in the basement, they're safe from any weather or, damage or fire. And it's free.
Aren't you all just really interested in taking a road trip over to Fermi and crawl through 3 floors to see what the hell's in there? Because
I'm sure it's a disaster now, because it's been empty and they're just using it as storage. But if we utilize it, and and I think that's what we're discussing right now, is the best utilization of the building. And the building being as large as it is, I think we could do a lot of things with that building. And, I would think records management, that's a good place for it. And, you have all your recreation facilities there, make it a multi-use building, but it's a completely town-oriented building that it's centrally located. Probate court, I agree, it's closer to Summers, but yet it's still centralized in Enfield.
Yeah, remember, they also have Union, Kenny.
Yep.
So we would be a little close. I'm totally on board.
They have what?
They have Union. Union is part of the Summers Court, Enfield Court.
Right, I understand
Yeah,
that, but
it's
moving
Stafford.
to Fermi is moving it closer to those
Yeah.
towns.
Yeah,
I mean, even though it's a couple miles,
no, it's still
I
good.
think Enfield picks the tab up anyways for most of it.
Most of it. There's a
Most of it.
pro rata share, but the other towns have asked for the probate court to be closer to them. That was the attractiveness of the institute.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's only a couple miles, but they avoid all the heavy traffic of 190 and 220. So,
Right.
yeah.
Can I ask
So,
a question? What's the institute?
It's the
Yeah.
Hazardville Institute. Karen can talk about it.
And then Lori, we can move the planning department up to the fourth floor in the town hall. Because now we won't have all that storage.
Talk about no windows.
We'll put some skylights for you.
But if we move the probate court over there, then we could,
That's right.
you know, if they were to move out to wherever. But we have, the Hazardville Institute is, well, Karen probably knows the true history, but basically it's an older building that from Colonel Hazard times, and it's been renovated, and it's like probably months away from being absolutely completely renovated and move-in status, but they have no parking. So that's our big problem. There's like no parking for it.
Don, it's on the corner of North Maple and Hazard Avenue.
Yeah.
It's the big brick building on the corner of North Maple and Hazard.
It's beautiful, and they've done
It's
a
a gorgeous building.
fabulous job.
Okay.
We know a couple people who can open it up and get you inside if you want to take a look around.
Yeah, if you're
Yeah, we
looking
do.
for an office in Enfield.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely gorgeous in there. They've
Cool.
done such a nice job. But there is this parking issue and access easements and stuff, so that's like the only messy part right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to make sure I was informed. I heard you guys throw out the institute a couple times. And I'm just like, I don't know this facility, so thanks.
Yep.
It is a town owned building, but the Hazardville Institute Conservancy Society, Inc., which is a nonprofit 501c3 or 3C, C3, I think it is. Anyway, they have a 99-year lease. I think it was started back in the 70s when the town was going to demolish the building. So
Okay.
we're quite a few years into it. We've been renovating it for most of that time. I didn't get involved early on. I wasn't in town then, but Gretchen's been on it from the beginning. Gil Vassar's been on it from the beginning, and a few others.
Yep,
So
Donna Suzak.
Yeah.
Rich, not Donna.
Bill Lee.
Oh, well, Donna was there when I went there.
Rich and Rich has been unbelievable. So we're still a couple $100,000 short. So if anybody has a check they want to write, I'll give you the address.
Great. Can we move on, Scott?
Sure.
Then Public Works, this is really kind of a short hold space. This is it's the one agency I still need to work with and probably the most meet with and probably the most important, as Lori has noted. And so I put in these 2 paragraphs to kind of hold the space, but more research and detail is actually needed here around them. And I have a feeling that's where, because the one interesting thing was kind of the split responsibility on recreation. The recreation department runs programming and Public Works runs the recreation facilities. And so I don't have that other side of the recreation story, and that's why the gap on the parks, as mentioned earlier. So.
Okay.
So social service was a weird one for me, or in hindsight, it was weird. Probably one of the best and most detailed and longest conversations I had with the department head. And from a demographic perspective, from what I see in the community, especially with an aging population, especially with the socioeconomic challenges of Thompsonville, this is a really critical agency, and these services are really critically important. And I tried to stress that in this brief thing, but at the end of the day, not a huge facilities need here. that their move into the Alcorn, there it is, Alcorn facility, provides them with more space to grow. They are worried about maybe a lack of a presence with the closing of the Lamagna Center. And then the co-response model pilot program with the police department and the need for kind of that social workspace co-located with the police add to the physical space needs over at that facility. So now the huge facility needs here, I kind of went back and forth on whether or not to include this in the community facilities, but I think it's important enough to get a few paragraphs of real estate. So
Ken, did you just put up your hand?
did.
Ken Nelson? I don't know if it was up.
I think it was up from
I'm
before.
sorry, yes, it was up. Back to buildings and grounds,
Yeah.
did they move to the annex? Where is
Buildings and grounds
moving
moved to Public Works.
They're gonna squeeze in that building too? I thought
I
they were
think-
going to the annex.
I did too. I thought they were going.
Maybe
into
they did
shop
move to the
space,
annex.
right?
Maybe
Right.
they did, but they were proposing another building over at Public Works, though.
Right, I know they were proposing it, but I know we have the facility for sale already, so they gotta go somewhere, and I
Yeah,
thought it
yeah.
was the annex.
Yeah, I think you're right.
Right, so that's something that I think we need to include, you know, in Public Works and the annex part of it, you know, is that a permanent move or, you know, especially now that the referendum failed?
I believe they are also putting a building over at Fermi. There was a request for proposals, I think, to put up some building over at the annex to store all the equipment. I don't
No,
think
I
they were
think
going
that
to
was-
use any
that
of the
was at
public
Public
works facilities.
Right, so if they're putting a building up there, is this a permanent? You know, and how much space are they taking from the facility and, you know, we gotta kind of separate that, and this is what I mean by organization. You know, if EMS is gonna be staged out of there and Public Works and meeting space, well, you don't want, you know, buildings and grounds right next to a meeting space while they're working on their equipment. And do we have somebody at the town who is overseeing the development of the annex? Lori, do you-
Public Works and Chris and Public Works were working together mostly.
right, so I just don't want to see a bunch of chaos created. I mean, we got a huge building where if it was organized properly, you know, like the basement, we talked about records management and, you know, who's overseeing this, because we got a lot of good ideas and we have no ideas from them on what they're doing.
That's why I said we'd try to get his facility assessments.
Right, okay. Thank you.
Lori, we've also talked about on the Agricultural Commission about having a community kitchen, a qualified commercial kitchen in town where farmers could process food and things and having it available for use, somehow a rental or something. So that might be something that we could do with the existing cafeteria. I don't know, you know, I've only been to Fermi to vote, so I didn't go to Fermi. I don't know how the kitchen's set up or the cafeteria was ever set up, if they even cook there or not. But it's just another thing that we've talked about having in town, and it could be rented out space. They have a nonprofit up in Massachusetts that handles an organization like that, and they have a facility. And they offer it out, so it might be able to be managed by some type of organization, if the town isn't interested.
Okay, good point.
think we're ready to move on to your findings.
Sure. So findings I kind of started with when I gave that big picture, kind of, the EMS and the police department, that referendum item kind of being a high priority. And then ultimately the investing in yourselves, which is something we've spoken about previously, in the context of parks and recreation facilities and the aesthetic character of the community. And then the idea of just continued maintenance on facilities. So with that then being said, I'll skip over the draft narrative and just kind of point you to, from my perspective, this is what I viewed as the priorities. My vision is that each of these would be flushed out further and kind of given more detail on what they are, but these were placeholders, and this was the order that I put them in. So number 1, public safety facility, number 2, EMS existing facility to remain as part of EMS, and number 3, quality of life, physical and aesthetic character investments. For me, that's things like Higgins Park, proactive facility maintenance, a community facilities master plan, and social services as a soft infrastructure investment. So it's quite evident to me now, Fermi comes into the picture here as a priority. And I guess, my other thought is, what are your guys' thoughts on what priorities are missing, and kind of, are my priority orderings right or wrong? Because they're just my thoughts, and at the end of the day, they have to be your thoughts.
So I wonder if number 2 is really worth the investment.
Okay.
Because EMS existing facility renovation, so it's an old fire station, 2-bay, very old building. To Karen's point earlier, could you find, it's got to be because they want to have EMS services closest to the population on that side of town, but perhaps you co-locate it at the Enfield Fire District, which is half a mile away.
Okay.
So I don't know how other people feel, but that seems like an expensive building to upgrade.
Even if you were to renovate it, I don't think it's big enough. It seems like just an entirely new solution.
Yeah. I grew up with emergency and stuff like that, and the paramedics and ambulances always came out of the fire departments. I've always agreed with this. They're first responders. And I mean, I think, with the lawsuit that's going on and everything, which I don't know a lot about, we sit down with them, work out a deal with them. I know the fire departments would like EMS if we could come to terms with them on it. And to your point, Scott, about the co-pays, not only that, but a lot of people are unaware that, because they don't make it too public, that Enfield residents without insurance don't have to pay for an ambulance if they go through Enfield Ambulance Service. I mean, maybe we negotiate with them, forget this lawsuit, whatever it is, and just say, look, we want that, whether, that's a contribution that the town makes to them for them taking it over. Because how many hundreds, if not millions, are we going to spend to renovate this building, which is still way too small for them? And the fire departments have the facilities and they're trained for it. And you walk in any fire department, they're immaculate. Their equipment's top notch and everything. And I truly believe they are the ones that should have EMS, and it puts EMS in all 5 corners of this town. You're not going to get a better response time than that. It's just not going to happen. I don't know what the lawsuit is, but somebody who does, maybe reach out and, if that could be a negotiating factor, but I don't even know that needs to be, because I know the fire departments want it.
Karen?
You know, when you call for an and there's an emergency, everybody responds anyway. You get the fire department, you get the police department, you get EMS. So, you know, we're already paying for people to be there and respond, whether it be volunteers or staff on the fire districts, because they're all going to union full-time staffers and more or less getting rid of their volunteers. And I mean, had an incident in the past month where, you know, it just so happened the police department was first, the ambulance came second, and the fire department came third, and there was probably 8 people there that were responding, and it seems redundant, and it's costing taxpayers money to have all those people there. If we're paying them all to be there, do they all need to be there? You know, I don't know. I mean, there was 3 different police cars. There was the EMS 2 in that, plus the supervisor showed up, and then 3 people at least from the fire department that showed up. So it seems so redundant to me that the taxpayers were paying on the fire district side, we're paying on the Enfield tax side to cover basically the same thing, because everybody's first responders. So I don't know if that can be negotiated somehow, or somehow whoever's closest, whatever facilities. I mean, all these vehicles have GPS on them. We know where they are. So if we know the ambulance is sitting at Enfield Square and there's an accident at Elman 91, gee, who's going to be the first one there? The EMS. Do we have to send the fire department? Maybe, if there's fluids. You know, but if it's a medical call with all these, like we've been having with all these COVID, you know, does the fire department need to respond? I don't know. If they're the first one there, then yes. If they're the closest and the first one able to respond, maybe yes. But it seems like a waste of resources to me, that we're not taking good advantage of all the trained people we have in town.
Well, I know one of the big issues, and I think, Scott, you'll back me up on this, is back when I first got involved, it was that a lot of the fire departments were not 24/7 staffed because they were volunteers. Well, if I'm correct now, they're all staffed 24/7. And so therefore that problem doesn't exist anymore. And the budget for Enfield EMS has got to be $1 million at least. And if we take, you know, 200,000 of that and put it towards the fire departments to offset the costs to keep the care, you know, free for residents of Enfield through insurance and stuff like that, it still keeps Enfield where we are right now, but it shifts everything over to the fire departments. And I see the way they run their crews and their fleets, and I mean, the town's doing a great job at it. I just don't think the town should be in the EMS business. And I was that way back then. But the stumbling block was, you know, they were fighting over, well, why are they getting paid when they won't run the ambulances at night? Well, now they all can. And, you know, they all need to work together. They're fire departments, period. You know, and it's not the fire and the police department where they're separate entities. You know, they're all here to do the same job, and that's to protect Enfield. And I think if we sat down with them and we had reasonable people at the table, this could happen.
Yeah, I don't know, Ken, if they're actually staffed 24/7. Thompsonville is. The other ones, I know some of the other ones, they staff Monday through Friday.
Yeah.
And they have, and it might be say 16-hour coverage, but then what they wind up doing is they pay volunteers a stipend to cover nights and weekends.
Right, but now our EMS is 24/7, right? We're staffed.
Yeah.
So, I mean, what's it matter whether they're staffed out of our facility or out of their facility? You know, and obviously the tax burden would shift over to the fire departments, but they're their own tax entity anyways. So the taxes would decrease on the town side, so to say, and they would increase on the fire side to help support the cost. But I just can't imagine anybody going against this if we could get the fire departments to agree. And I think it's a great move, and it should have been done years and years ago.
The only, I'm not even saying we have to go that far, but I'm saying we can house the ambulances in the fire departments. If the fire department is willing and has space, the EMS people who need a warm facility to keep their ambulance instead of letting it run 24/7, let them be housed in that fire department different times of the week or the month or whatever. They could rotate around to the different districts, but they would possibly pay rent or something to that effect. If they can still stay somewhat separate entities, but let's make better use of these first responders. I believe the fire districts all have an on-duty or an on-call person. I'm not sure what they exactly call it, but
Duty
that
officer.
person, the what? The duty officer. Yeah, the duty officer. And that person is assigned the overnight for that district. But I think we've just got to work better together. It's all tax dollars, whether it's going to that pocket or this pocket or the other one. So it just seems like we could make it work better.
Now, a lot of our firemen are paramedics also, correct?
Probably EMTs.
So if you look at it that way too, you could adjust the staff with Enfield EMS, because you would have a paramedic fireman, so he's wearing both hats, riding the ambulance, so if that situation arose where a fireman had to be present, we had one there. Again, I'm going back to when I was a kid, but that's how it was. So yeah, maybe we reduce some staff. It saves costs for the fire departments. And, I do agree with you, Karen. It's triple tax dollars going to every single scene. And we could eliminate that, or eliminate a lot of it. And I know if I was the fire department, I wouldn't want somebody in my house unless there was something in it for me. And if they were in charge, then everything's in it for them. And, I don't know that any of the fire departments would need an expansion to make this happen.
So Don, what's your recommendation on, and we can go around in circles, I'm sure, all day. Would your recommendation be to get a consultation from the head of EMS and maybe some of the fire chiefs and kind of get their thoughts and their opinions on this? Because I understand we're writing the POCD. If we put these are our thoughts, and I think Ken's maybe the only one that has the experience. If we put this in here, but it's totally not feasible from their perspective, it seems like a waste of paper at that point.
Yeah, I'm trying to mull this over.
Along those lines too, Mike, do we have any representation here from the new council? So, we're talking, you and I, Scott, it's a different council now. I don't even know if they would be on board with this. I think that would be the first question, is to talk to the council and see if they're willing to at least entertain the idea to get to that table, Mike.
Melissa has her hand up.
Related question while you're mulling. How micro should the plan of conservation and development be about this? Really, if it's a big picture land use and facilities priorities, maybe you state a sentiment that whenever services can be consolidated, it should be considered or something, but you don't go nuts.
Yeah, that's where kind of the idea of going to council, the idea of going to EMS, the idea of going to 5 fire districts. I think we're going well beyond what the kind of role, scope, and so forth is. That this is about a a recommendation to, it could be broad in the sense of whenever there's opportunities to consolidate, services, consider it. Or it could be a recommendation for, a specific recommendation to explore potential consolidation or greater efficiencies in providing emergency services across police, fire, and EMS and so forth. So I think we're more in that realm than going too far down the rabbit hole of exploring potentials. So.
Yeah, I like that idea, Don. Just try to put out there that it should be explored and because even the 5 fire districts, there's been talk about consolidating them, and there's a lot of pushback from that. So, they are working together on a lot of things, in purchasing power and things like that, and they are kind of moving towards that. But I don't think they're there yet.
I'll just let this out. I was biting my tongue because there's always, whenever there's fire districts, there's always kind of these turf challenges. And I learned long ago working on a plan in Groton where there's 7 different districts to kind of stay away from the politics of districts. But, in the discussion of kind of consolidation and so forth, the first thing running through my mind was, well, if you think you're going to realize savings through providing EMS through the fire districts, why not just pull the fire districts into the town and have one joint fire department and, EMS? So my point being, I'm kind of being sarcastic in saying that. My point being is there's many different ways you could look at a reorganization, consolidation, whatever it is you want to call it. But I don't really think a POCD wants to go into the politics of that.
Right.
So,
yeah.
So
I agree.
Yeah. I just view it as a third rail. So
Don't touch that.
With some pointed language to suggest, to nudge. Yep. Yeah. And my point at the beginning was I didn't like point number 2 because we're taking a small, outdated facility and we're making it a top priority for our renovation.
Yep.
I'm assuming number 1 happens, right? So like if 1 happens, then 2 is also a priority.
Yeah. So just let me be clear on that, because I'm glad you pointed that out. My assumption in the moment was the referendum was going to go through next week. And then if you have the new public, safety facility and the relocation, then a vacated existing EMS facility, from my perspective, rose as a priority to kind of deal with that and confront the issue. Does it remain EMS or does it become something else? And that's why it elevated to a number 2. I wasn't saying in and of itself it was a number 2. So.
Yeah. Okay.
But I'll drop that down in priority and I'll work language on it. So to just better explain this, I think it's something to explore. And at the very least, the reutilization of that facility must be explored. So
Maybe that's where you put the recommendation that other facilities be looked at before a major renovation of that facility be done or something, including a partnership with the fire districts or something of some kind.
Did Erin Riggett actually have any recommendations as to what they should do?
Refresh me on who that name is. I'm sorry.
She's the head of the EMS, the ambulances.
Yep. I mean, at the end of the day, their true priority was the referendum passing and getting into that facility. And it wasn't
Okay.
just about indoor storage. It was about, conference space, training space, being able to share that stuff with the police department. They found a lot of synergies there and opportunities. That being said, due to the service call needs into the Thompsonville area, the proportion of calls and so forth, they did feel that maintaining a presence in that area of town could be beneficial. And that's where then I kind of pushed the conversation, and where the discussion around that facility became the idea of maintaining it. So as EMS, because it did provide that geography.
Yeah.
So
All right, thanks.
Yep. I'm done if you're done.
Yeah, are we good? It's
You're
quarter
good.
to
Gone through
three.
the document.
Yeah,
This is
Anyone
like
have-
the most
Melissa
horrible
has her
thing
hand
that
up.
I'm doing as an interloper, but I want to request something for a future agenda so
Sure.
that you could all be set free like in the next 30 seconds. I've been kind of reading the document as you go, and I've done a bad job of finding my way into these meetings. I noticed that there is an early chapter about sustainability and resilience, which is very much about principles, and I'm glad it's there. But when you're looking at facilities, there might be, or I'd like to see consideration of renewable energy, energy storage, energy security kind of stuff, and resilient construction as something to think about if it's not too late. And if it
No, it's
is,
not.
I will zip my lip.
Okay. No, it's not.
Okay.
So, Melissa, could I actually lean on you, since you're an interloper, and put yourself in this position? You seem to have a bit of knowledge around facilities. I was wondering if you and I could connect via email and find a
Yeah,
time to chat.
absolutely. I have just enough clues to be dangerous, as Lori at least knows, but I'm happy to be dangerous in a conversation.
All right, and I'd enjoy that. So, thank you.
I could send you both an email with giving you both each other's emails.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay.
Okay. Well, let me just
What's
quickly
next,
thank you
Don?
guys. Well, you guys have been informative. You've been helpful. This gives me better direction. And I'm going to get to work on tightening this up. At the end of the day, Lori, the reason why I didn't push on meeting with Public Works immediately on community facilities is Public Works is now critical to the last component, which is infrastructure. So you and I do need to schedule a meeting to meet with them and go over both kind of community facilities and infrastructure. And at this point, I'm hesitant to commit to having infrastructure in January. I just think with the holidays, that's not realistic. So I think maybe for January, I come back with revisions to community facilities, since I think there was enough stuff of interest here and passion within the members on specific topics that I come back with revised language and findings and so forth for January, and then we'll aim for February for infrastructure.
Okay. Sounds good. We'll chat
Cool. All
elsewhere.
right.
Okay.
All right. Committee, I want to thank all of you, and if I don't hear or see of you, enjoy your holiday season. I hope it's safe.
Happy holidays.
thank you.
Thank
You
you.
too.
Thanks. Great
Good
guys.
night,
Happy
everyone.
holidays to everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Night.
Thank you.